Have you ever wondered what lurks in the deepest, blackest corners of our oceans? Places where no light has ever touched, where pressure can crush a man in seconds, and where science claims there's nothing left to discover? Tonight, you're going to hear a story that proves them wrong. A story of men who lived in steel tubes 1,000 feet beneath the surface, and what they found staring back at them in the dark. This is not a campfire tale. It's not a rumor passed around a bar. This is a first-hand account from a diver who swears he came face-to-face with something ancient, something intelligent, something that should not exist. Before we dive in, make sure you hit subscribe to Dark Night Horror Stories, because here the fear is real, and every story takes you one step deeper into the abyss. Now turn off the lights, put on your headphones, and let's descend together. This is Ghost Stories, the Choir Beneath the Sea. He'd spent most of his adult life inside pressure, steel, protocol, and silence. As a saturation diver on the Jupiter oil rig, he worked the kind of jobs where running isn't an option. At 1,000 feet down, fear is useless. At 250 feet, a single hour of labor can demand 5 more hours of slow, humiliating ascent just to keep the body from tearing itself apart. Gas in the blood is arithmetic with consequences. Race the math and you die bent and screaming. He liked that honesty. The sea laid out its rules plainly: obey or pay. When the company decided to relocate Jupiter, the rig's whole world convulsed. Overtime, tempers, and sleep owed to tomorrow. Harvey, the rig boss, laughed the way a captain laughs before a long storm, praising his rough crew as if pride could weld steel. When the flatbed support finally anchored at the new coordinates, the surface men cheered, then vanished into the tyranny of schedules. That was when his real work began. He and John lived inside the pressurized system slung beneath the boat, a cylindrical habitat that held a different atmosphere than the world above. There, their bodies stayed saturated, gas, dissolved into blood and bone, so a bell could drop them to the seabed without the daily dance of compressing and decompressing. The topside techs were their lifeline: food, clean air, hot water, checks, and voices. Any failure up there could become a tomb down here. He loved it. The hum of systems, the Donald Duck quack of voices over helium, the ritual of clipping into the bell and dropping into a darkness that had learned to live without sunlight. John didn't love it. John liked the pay. He'd trade the abyss for a slow job on a sandy pier if the wages matched. But wages never do. So John followed the checklist. He followed the fear. And the diver, who had always laughed at superstition, followed the work. Relocation stole more than sleep. It stole noise. In the first week, the seabed felt wrong not for what was present but for what wasn't. Work lights cast coins of yellow into the ink, and life usually drifted at the edges. Shrimp popping like static. Fish slipping through beams, something curious bumping a camera. Instead, there was vacancy, a chapel after service. He chalked it up to the move. Things relocate too. John tried to call his girlfriend from inside the habitat, the way divers do even when the call is more ritual than connection. He set the phone down halfway through dialing, sat, smiled a worried smile, and whispered, "Did you hear that?" The diver didn't. The walls hummed. Air cycled. Dinner arrived through the pressurized tube. Lukewarm, miraculous. John's eyes jittered like the needles on a cheap gauge. When he slept, he twitched awake, breath catching, as if his dreams wore weight belts. On shift 3, they hooked test piping, torqued valves, labeled bolts, then called it. John asked if anything had looked strange on the job. The diver said no. Strangeness is the default at those depths. Fish invent their own electricity. The dark grows architecture. Strange is what becomes ordinary when there are no exits. By the next day, John was pale, vitals slanting out of the green. Medical did what medical must. Isolation chamber, solo decompression, no contact. A common cold is not common in pressure. It's a time bomb in the sinuses, a trap in the ears. They couldn't risk contagion. The diver would work alone until the company could pressurize a replacement. He told himself it would be fine. Then he saw the pipeline they'd rigged together, bands missing, mistakes threaded through like bad stitches. He'd have to tear their work down and start over. Fatigue can make hands stupid. Or fear can. He wasn't yet ready to decide which had owned John's hands. Alone, he descended in the bell, stepped out onto a seabed that looked like a stage before actors. The water wasn't murky. It was darker, as if color had been edited out. He radioed topside to check lights. The board read normal. He worked. Anyway, because work was the only grammar down here. Hours passed, he forgot to rest. The suit's heater ticked like old bird bones. Movement teased his periphery the way a gnat teases skin. Felt, not seen. He swung his lamp. The distance went still. Sometimes you feel watched, not because something is looking at you, but because the world has gone too quiet for your nerves to accept you're alone. He secured a line, turned to ascend, and the water nudged him. An unmistakable push in the wake of a body passing too close. Shark, he thought, and squeezed the line, lamp carving frantic arcs. Nothing. He climbed. 40 feet. Breathing. Measured because panic chews oxygen. The second hit came harder, a bump that stole equilibrium. He spun light and saw a thing drift away, ray-shaped, broad and rippling, not fleeing so much as coasting. It was the hair that decided panic, trailing kelp-like strands, long and too human in the way they moved. His mind yelped no. His body responded with a disciplined climb. He told himself stories to keep the spine upright. It was a ray. It was an artifact of angles. It was nerves stitched to isolation. 10 feet higher, those stories died. The water ahead bloomed with presence. Something clung to the ascent line, a shape blocking his route up. Large, centered, deliberate. He let go and kicked backward, more afraid of contact than of sinking. The line went out of reach. The dark found its teeth. It was twice his size, maybe more, because water lies about scale. The body rippled like a living parachute, the midsection flat and restless, the edges flexing on some private current. A hand, yes, a hand, came away from the line to reach. Toward him, webbed fingers ending in black talons that winked when the light found them. Its eyes were almond-huge, almost all of a face. Beneath, a ragged round mouth ringed with needle teeth closed and opened silently, as if it were considering how to pronounce him. He drifted fast, kicking without frenzy, keeping his fins tight, to avoid broadcasting panic. The thing followed, not lunging, not retreating, only reclaiming the water he occupied. Every inch closer made the line farther. Every second stretched a new life in which he was not a man in a suit, but a jointed animal being weighed by another species' appetite. He thought of decompression charts, of the physics that govern survival, and wondered if the sea had its own charts for what to eat and when. Something slid around his waist from behind, slick, corded, and alive. Tentacles, no suckers, spines, embedded along their length like 1,000 biting thorns. They cinched him, careful as handcuffs. Pain flared where the suit pinched into skin. He kept still because stillness seemed smarter than rupture. The ray thing drifted closer until talons ticked his faceplate, a nursery rhyme tap, tap, tap that somehow felt like speech. He could not scream. He could only calculate. Oxygen, depth, time. The numbers arrived like unhelpful friends. The tentacles pulled him down and away into the glow of the work lights, the surgical circle where the rig's project waited with bolts and bones. He was a specimen being placed on a tray. And at last, in the frantic precision of terror, he saw it. The thing holding him wasn't the ray at all. It was something older and clever, squid-like without the softness of squid, muscle threaded through tendons, eyes glittering with the sober look of animals that learned calculus without teachers. The squid thing held him at arm's length, a jailer displaying its captive. Its body undulated in practiced measure, as if each motion corresponded to some instrument he could not hear. When it chirped, the pitch lanced through bone, a keen that lived somewhere behind his eyes. The ray drifted aside, and from beyond the circle of light other shapes answered the call, more of the ray things gliding into view, arranging themselves at the ring's edge with a choreography that felt too clean to be mere appetite. They lined the darkness like pews, heads turned together toward the black beyond the lamps. Worship has a posture, and they wore it. He felt the tentacles loosen just enough to promise escape, just enough to promise hope could be punished. His mind ran drills. If they slacken more, tuck and kick, don't thrash, make small water, aim for the line and let gravity invert into ascent. But the water itself had begun to decide matters. A pressure that wasn't pressure, bent against his ears. The light seemed suddenly frail, like paper lanterns before a wind. Something came through, the black, slowly, confidently, first a head the size of a car, crowned with whisker-long filaments that tasted the water in restless sweeps. The mouth had the flex of a lion's, but the wrong geometry, too wide and too calm. The body that followed went on and on. A train, of flesh, a school bus length and then more, worm-smooth doubles of tentacles nested under its face like a gentleman's hands clasped before a murder. He realized the sea could make kings. He had not prepared for royalty. One of those lower tentacles shot out with bored precision, seized a ray thing mid-glide, and reeled it in. The big mouth did not open. Instead, a section along its belly parted, like a lid, and from that seam sprouted other mouths, smaller, round, ringed with the same yellow needles, flowering on worm-length stalks. They fed with clinical indifference. The choir did not sing. It folded back, trembled. The squid thing shivered. The tentacles around him slackened. He became a problem not worth holding. He rose. He reached for the line the way a man reaches for a name he's forgotten. Blind, urgent, devout. Fingers closed. He did not kick wildly. He made small water, respectful water, each motion a prayer that friction might go unnoticed. The Leviathan's wake rewrote currents. He felt it tug his suit with the gravity of a passing train. The light circle shrank below, busy with rituals he did not wish to understand. He climbed until the darkness stopped feeling personal. Only then did he care about his own breath. Numbers again. Depth, time, nitrogen. He heard himself counting seconds in a voice that didn't sound like his, the helium making him comic, which felt obscene. He thought about what it would mean to let go, to rocket to the surface and die spectacularly, and felt a cruel logic tug. At least that death would be his. He kept climbing anyway. There is dignity in obeying physics when monsters do not. Inside, the bell he shook because skin doesn't know the difference between salvation and shock. He tried to report in phrases that didn't sound like lunacy. Topside listened until listening turned into colleagues making jokes about crazy being contagious. He stared at the hatch, sure metal would crumple, sure water would pour in bearing. Royalty. Steel held. That night became a new kind of long. When his eyes closed, he saw tentacles tapping his faceplate, and beyond them, whiskers tasting him as a category. By morning, he'd decided his story was a failure of nerve dressed up as fiction. Then he remembered the pipeline. John's absent, bands, the fumbled work. Fear has a way of leaving fingerprints before it leaves a face. He slept with his hands clenched, like he might still be holding the line. Topside decompression peeled days off him in measured hours. When the chance finally came to breathe unpressurized air, the world felt too light, like a lie told for comfort. He met John at a bar that smelled of salt and old decisions. They did not talk about the abyss first, men rarely do. They talked about football, fries, someone's cousin. Then the words fell out of John like ballast. I thought I was losing my mind. He'd seen things that didn't exist. He wanted out. They did not describe shapes. They described symptoms. The way silence grows pressure. The way the dark edits the world. The way fear becomes a colleague that signs the logbook. The diver felt the small relief of a shared madness. Two men telling the same hallucination stopped sounding like hallucination. The company hired a 6-man team to finish the job. Protocol looked like courage from far away. 2 weeks later, that team disappeared, all but one, a man who bolted in a private panic straight to the surface. His body paid. His mouth paid first, the words pouring from him about monsters, then his nervous system cashed out. The medical file got thicker, and then, abruptly, very thin. Government men visited with polite faces and geometry teacher ties. They spoke carefully about national interests and reckless rumors. They said seabed work is complicated. They said we do not want hobbyists dying on myths. They said that if he insisted on describing the mouths and the choir and the king of the trench, they could arrange for a hospital that would keep him safe from his own story. Files grew, and then, like a trick of light, they didn't. The medical crew logged his ramblings, then received an order with a letterhead heavier than their paychecks: destroy. The diver watched a shredder turn testimony into flutter. He'd expected anger. He felt something colder, like a room chilled by a door left open. Truth can be oxygen or solvent. In this case, it was both. He changed how he moved through days. Alone in an apartment that still carried the ghost hiss of helium in his ears, he cataloged memory like evidence. How big the head was, how the whiskers tasted the current, how the belly mouths opened without joy. He thought about science. The arrogance of declarations like everything is mapped, mysteries are quaint. He'd been that voice once. Now the voice felt like a child announcing ownership of the ocean because he'd waded to his knees. Sometimes at night he woke to the sensation of a gentle tap on his cheek, and it took a second to understand it was his own heartbeat bumping against a pillow seam. Sometimes his shower drain made a sound he could only describe as hungry. He knew these were tricks, but he also knew tricks can be rehearsals. If the sea was theater, his apartment had become backstage: ropes, pulleys, props, and a script he wasn't allowed to read. He told John they should never go back. John nodded, eyes glassy in a way that suggested he'd already left in every way that mattered. Men like Harvey kept the rig running because commerce is a faith that refuses apostasy. Men like the diver learned a different prayer: let the deep forget me. He tried to argue with himself the way rational men do, catalog the species that resemble what he saw: rays with cephalic lobes, deep-sea squid with spines, eel-pout mouths that frown like rings. Science can be a mercy when the alternative is faith. But mercy failed to fit the facts. Nothing in fish books wore whiskers like that. Nothing placed mouths along a belly seam like drawers in a morgue. Nothing commanded the others the way a tide commands shoreline. He remembered the way the smaller creatures had parted, the way they had trembled without noise, the way the squid thing had relaxed its grip when the king arrived. As if etiquette dictates when to hold a guest and when to let him stand. Predator or priest? The words were wrong. The deep has roles we don't have names for. What fed beneath Jupiter might not hunt so much as curate. He wondered how often men mistook survival for luck. He hadn't outswum a monster. He'd been dismissed by it. Left to climb because he didn't matter. The insult sat deeper than fear. It changed how he entered rooms. How he watched streetlights quiver on rain. How he read headlines about mysteries solved. He didn't want explanations anymore. He wanted silence that meant we don't know yet, not we refuse to consider. So he wrote. Anonymous, masked by care. Not for revenge against the men who shredded files, or the officers who spoke politely. For the stranger he imagined, a boy in love with maps, a girl who wants to learn pressure math, so they would carry a second thought with them when someone says there are no kingdoms left. There are. They are simply not ours. He sent the account into the world as a diver sends a bell into black water, sealed, weighted, prayed over. He took care with names. He took care with routes. Government men can count. So can things that live long enough. He'd learned to fear both kinds of mathematics. Maybe nothing would happen. Maybe everything already had. On certain mornings he imagined the ocean waiting beyond ordinary weather, the way a cathedral waits beyond a door. Cold, enormous, not offended if you enter, not relieved if you leave. On certain nights he could not bring himself to look at a window because windows pretend to be water you can trust. He knew exaggeration when he heard it. This wasn't that. It was simply how you live after learning depth has customs. People will scoff, he wrote. People must. Doubt is a kind of decompression. It keeps minds from bursting as they surface into possibility. But some will hear the part that matters. You don't run in pressure. You obey physics. You obey fear when it is fluent. If you ever learn a new word for king in the language of the deep, you will not teach it to anyone you love. He looked at his hands and saw no scars. The suit had taken the spines. The mind had taken the rest. He closed the notebook and let the room return to ordinary square air, a ceiling lamp humming, a cup cold by the sink. Somewhere, under a boat that still bears Jupiter's name, pipes throb and men weld, and the water remembers a ceremony at the edge of light. His story isn't a warning so much as a weather report, a system forming where we've decided nothing forms. Don't sail into it thinking maps are kings. So now you know what lies beneath the waves, and why some secrets of the ocean were never meant for us. Was it madness brought on by pressure and isolation, or a glimpse into something humanity was never meant to see? The truth may be buried in shredded files and silenced reports, but the deep never forgets. If this story kept you on the edge of your seat, imagine what else waits in the dark. Don't leave just yet. Hit subscribe to Dark Night Horror Stories and join us every week as we uncover more chilling tales that will haunt your nights and crawl into your dreams. And remember, the ocean isn't empty, it's listening.